Any new thing is always exciting at the beginning stages, be it a business, a career path, a goal. It's exciting at the infancy because it's most likely you're coming from a place of anxiety, depression, you had no purpose, nothing was going on for you. Therefore, you found this path, a business, or something you look forward to, something that comes with the promise of the escape of poverty. The motivation doesn't have to be purely financial or always financial. It could be a sense of fulfillment. It could be something you derive pleasure, an activity you enjoy taking. So you're getting new orders, new clients, you're signing new people, you're making progress. Every single step forward is gratifying to the soul. But something happens in the middle, which is what I want us to discuss. Because what you do in that instance, when nobody's blowing up your phone, all the clients leave, your business starts to decline as a consequence of bad PR, or something happened that impedes progress. What you do in that situation decides the whole trajectory of your destiny. I've said it previously, the small things affect the big things. The micro leads to the macro. One small area can spill into all spheres of productivity. An undisciplined individual is undisciplined in all aspects. If you struggle to go to the gym, if your consistency is little, you notice something very interesting. It's difficult to undertake other kinds of goals. If you can't be consistent in going to the gym or in one aspect of your life, it becomes difficult to transpose discipline to other spheres. So the problem is not necessarily going to the gym or being consistent for the sake of muscles. If you commit yourself to something, the more you stick to it, the more you refuse to procrastinate, the more you refuse to negotiate your values, the more you refuse to shrink, to accept disrespect or to not accept disrespect, to not go down the path you've disgusted or you highly detest, the better for you. Because your subconscious remembers all of this. That's not the discourse of tonight. That's not what I want us to discuss. The main point is that middle ground when everything looks like a flat line. Even worse, you begin to decline. It's easy, and this is why I dislike taking advice from people who have done nothing in their life, because I believe your results in any sphere is what gives you authority to address matters. If you don't own a business, do not teach me how to run mine. If you've never done XYZ, do not correct people. There are individuals today who have no ministry, no podcast, no business, no sense of achievement. All they do every single day is to come out and point and comment on people who are making considerable progress. The same energy it takes to criticize is the same it takes to advance. That middle ground is the most painful experience, the most painful aspect of your journey. The initial point I made before I digressed was it's easy for these peasant influencers with no experience, no hurtful feeling, no business, haven't been kicked in the feet before, doesn't know what it means to promise XYZ to someone or promise to deliver, and the finances doesn't arrive on time as a consequence of some blockade, or you promise money somewhere, or the rent is due, and the supposed income stream has been shut down because of a mistake, or If an accountant runs away with the money, they don't know what it means to have real life problems. I'm not talking of theory or speculation or telling me what I should do in various instances. Real life experience with real time pressure. Don't know what it feels like, and they want to speculate. It's easy in difficult times for you to give advice. Think positively. Oh, it's going to be fine. This too shall pass. You don't know what it feels like for the landlord to be banging your door and you have no stream of income, nobody to call, nobody to help, and you're sitting trying to be positive. How do you think abundantly? How do you think you have paid the rent when the landlord lives in the same compound as you, banging the door every single day? How do you think positively? How do you think your way out of that situation? Exactly. This too shall pass. I recall one time, I will not give details for obvious reason, but I did something that would cost me my stake in a university at the time. So I was about to be expelled as a consequence of that action. I recall thinking how I disappointed my family, my viewers, every single person who looked up to me. Not necessarily because I lost my space in school, but more so what I'm being accused of, the crime that led to the expulsion. I recall every single day, although with the consciousness of manifestation, I had various knowledge, various words in my knowledge bank. There were many things to do, but guess what? I thought negatively. I replayed the scenario of how it would end badly, how I'll be expelled. And when it came time to finally face the panel who would decide my fate, guess what happened? It got postponed, which would heighten the anxiety even further. So the problem was not the expulsion, it wasn't fixed in time. It's a judgment that was to be passed. So usually the penance for the crime allegedly committed is expulsion. That is the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you get suspended for a year or two. But by the time you're back, all your peers would not just have graduated, but made significant progress with their life. So either ways, you're fucked. So how do you think positively? How do you think positively in that instance? How do you take your mind off? How do you believe you've gotten out of the situation? It is painful. People don't understand. People just regurgitate statements somewhere on the internet, something they saw that made logical sense. But when you're in this situation, I shared it countlessly with my mentees. When you're with me, the energy is high. You feel confident. You're on the skies. You're floating. Every single person, I'm behind Ifeanyi. I'm behind this guy. And there's vibes everywhere. And I said to them, the day the problem associated with this mindset comes, pray to God you overcome. As a man thinketh, so it is. What happens when your thoughts of wealth after 5, 6 years has not materialized and your peers who you've made audacious statements to, check me out in the next 5, 6 years, I'll be successful, and you're forced to bow your head in shame? What happens then? What happens when it's obvious you're poor due to the quality of your apparel and you see friends who have the semblance of success To top it off with a luxury vehicle or luxury item, how do you be brave in that situation? How are you confident in that situation? Please, I'm not advocating for materialism or to place your confidence on what you wear or what you have. I've spoken extensively debunking that kind of lifestyle. It is stupid to the core, whether you can afford it or not. It is stupid to place your self worth on something external. What happens when they seize the car? What happens when it breaks down? You lose your sense of self worth. In fact, tying yourself to externality is the quickest way to downfall. Once the hierarchy notice you as a person is connected to things, then they can use your assets to manipulate your actions. And anybody who's at the top or at the bottom understands perfectly that the government doesn't have your interests at heart. The government sees you as numbers. The government doesn't give a shit about your reputation or how people would perceive you or what will happen once you've executed their bad deeds. All they care about is achieving their wicked deeds. Their selfish desires is all they care about. And who gets fucked in the process is none of your business. So, in the same instance, if you do not capitulate, you lose your assets, you lose every single thing you've worked for, or you capitulate and you lose the asset eventually because you would have been so disenfranchised with the public such that the lack of support, the lack of hope, the lack of belief in whatever it is you have to offer makes you to decline. So, irregardless of what side of the aisle you stand upon, you are fucked. Again, that's not the main discourse. I keep diverging. I want to talk about not giving up because the middle phase is the pain fierce moment, is one of the nastiest battle you would ever face. Like I said, it is easy to present the solution. Where the problem lies is in the application. Back to my story of the expulsion. Finally, I got acquitted of my crimes and nothing happened. I went back because I'm a professional and I analyzed every single thing I did, how I reacted, what I did right, what I did wrong, what I should have done better. And I noticed something. Had I left the situation as it is, had I detached myself and see how things played out, it would have proven better than running around. That was a literal sermon that these two shall pass. I'm explaining to you in details because I understand perfectly what it means to go through painful situations, the loss of finances, especially the loss of finances. In fact, I used to make statements like, regardless of how much I have, I would be confident with thousands of dollars in the bank account until one day I was at zero. And by somehow came every single person knew. How? Did my bank balance leak? Did they peek through my account? Absolutely not. But the confidence depleted. I now began to ask for permission. Where is your pride, sir? Where is your confidence? You no longer speak in an assertive manner. Ah, I noticed you did this. It was like a literal sermon of how people discern broke individuals. Is not a consequence of the pocket, but the poverty have so subjugated your mind that led to low self-esteem. You do not believe this is for you. What's the difference between a rich man and a poor man. The rich kings, they believe everything is theirs. They are willing to take. They don't care. They do not say please. They do not beg. I hope you're not subverting this teaching by not begging. You understand perfectly of what I mean. They do not need permission to execute. Not the literal please, thank you. No, no, no. They do not need permission to execute. Most of you ask your friends, what do you think of this lady, to get the approval before you actually approach. In fact, all you're doing is buying yourself an out, not to take the action. It's a poor man's mentality. The mentality in and of itself translates to the outcome. If you think like a poor person, you would inevitably embody the results. But if you're poor and you think like the rich, it's only a matter of time before you attract the requisite level of relationship and income to exalt you. I recall at the infancy of my career hanging around a lot of poor people, and I would notice something. Our rhetoric were very different. I would discuss ideas. I would discuss the future. I would discuss how things works, how the world works, different kinds of opportunities, what to do when you get X amount. As a consequence, the poor individuals, the bourgeoisies, would be transformed by being in my presence. But something happened. This was not the kind of rhetoric they wanted to hear. Hence, they found their group and they stuck towards it. By that mindset alone, it is repelling anybody who's not on those frequencies and attracting people who are, or attracting people who resonate with me. So, by this logic, it validates the initial statement that once you have a transformed mind, it attracts the requisite level of people to take you out of that situation. If the kind of conversations you have no longer resonates with the peasants and bourgeoisies, you would invariably find yourself speaking to rich men. Again, I'm diverging. The initial point I want to highlight in anything you're going through is this too shall pass. Think about the last time you went through a difficult situation. Everything was bad, you were fucked, but things were bad. You had no idea how you would come out of this storm. And finally, once you exit, your brain starts to make sense of the situation and you feel like a fool for overreacting. You feel like a fool for crying endlessly. Time that should have been spent in productive means was channeled towards the tears game, and you feel like a fool. In essence, it's the same mindset you should approach this situation with. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. It's not going to be easy to think positively. It is painful, especially when it has to do with the issue of finances. This is something that is literal. This is something you need to tackle head on. This is something that is existent. It is now. You need the money now. Observe from this perspective. If you think negatively, your outcome is determined. If you think positively, there's a guarantee of 50-50 chance it might happen. So, which side of the aisle are you walking on? Who are you siding with? Exactly. So, make the decision for yourself and you'll be fine. As always, my friends, pleasure speaking to you. I'll see you in the next one.